side of the road, and whether it's the relational road or the physical road, when someone violates your boundaries, it produces anything from a mild irritation to discomfort to anger to fear to breaking off a relationship. A boundary, quite simply put, is this. It's where one person stops and another person starts. It's where one thing stops and another thing starts. And where the one stops and the other starts is called a boundary. And boundaries are often given by markers, or verbally, boundaries are created by the word no. No, you can't stand that close to me. No, you can't hit the ball in my space. No, you can't drive your car on my side of the road. And no, you can't make me do your agenda if it's not God's will for my life, no matter how guilty you try to make me feel. Boundaries are essential for all of us. Boundaries are essential for health. Boundaries are essential for relationships. Boundaries are essential for you to do life in a way that honors God. And are you ready for this? God has boundaries. And one of the most important times God lays out boundaries is in the Old Testament, when he wants to take a people and make them distinct and help them understand who he is, where he stops, and how they need to stop in relationship with one another, and where you give room for other people to start. And the title of the series is called God's Boundaries. It's a fresh look at the Ten Commandments, but look at them through the perspective of boundaries. When boundaries are broken, relationships falter. Reuben Shelley, in a book called Written in Stone, Ethics from the Heart, writes this when looking back at the 60s experiment, and then the 70s and the 80s. And at the heart of all that he's going to say is that boundaries were destroyed. He says the theme of the 60s was anti-establishment. In the protest against government, family, church, people who assumed that God was dead sank into self-destructive era of drugs, uninhibited sex, and moral anarchy. Next, we moved into the self-absorbed decade of the 70s. Tom Wolfe dubbed it the decade of me, and its bestsellers were Looking Out for Number One and Winning Through Intimidation. We endured then the golden age of greed, the decade of the 80s. Athletes gambled on sporting events. Wall Street kingpins were jailed for insider training. Officials in government were caught in sex, drug, and influence peddling scandals. Now, and later, the 90s and the early 21st century were faced with a crisis of ethics. Once what we took for granted as common decency is now uncommon. The utterly outrageous has become ordinary. Boy, you believe that, don't you? The obscene is commonplace. Our code of ethics has eroded in such a massive scale that we've become cynical about morality, and we sense that something is terribly, terribly wrong with the spiritual fabric of our world. Since 1960, listen carefully, violent crime in America has increased more than 500%. A Justice Department study in 1987 predicted that 8 out of 10 Americans will be a victim of a violent crime in their lifetime. Crime is so prevalent in America that Americans have altered their lifestyles out of fear. Whole sections of major cities are considered unsafe. 1/4 of the population have put in home security systems. Shoppers worry about where to park at shopping malls. Women carry mace in their glove compartments and purses. More and more people are carrying guns, and newspapers and talk shows document the fact that crime is the most important subject on people's hearts. He wrote that before terrorism began to occur. What I want to suggest is that we did experiments in the 60s where we cast off restraint or boundaries, and the overwhelming consensus in our day is